What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carrots podcast. I'm your host, Steph, and today joining me on the pod is Rich Madrid. If you guys are on Twitter, you may know him. You may have gotten in arguments with him before, but at the end of the day, you always love him. How you doing today, Rich?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Not too bad. Excited for this game, of course. So we're going to talk about that, and of course, in particular, the offense and how they match up against the Cowboys defense this time around against these two teams. First, let's look at some of the injury reports for both teams. For the 49ers, pretty freaking healthy. I mean, the only players designated that is out is Jimmy Garoppolo and Ambry Thomas, and those guys have been out for quite a while. Cowboys, their left tackle Jason Peters is out with that hip injury, and I don't know why I put his name as Kayron. It's Jayron Kearse, their safety. He's going to be out with a knee injury, actually a grade 1 MCL sprain. So we'll see how he does with that injury. But as we know, MCL sprains could take a couple weeks to heal. It's playoffs though, so he's saying screw it, I'm going to go for it. So we'll see if or not that does impact him at all in this game. Let's look at the Cowboys defense, though, as a whole, what they've done this season, because this is one of the groups that I think has improved, this season compared to the last time that these two teams met. So they are first in takeaways per game, second in sack percentage, second in turnover margin per game. I think these three right here are huge, and just prove the challenge that Brock Purdy is going to be facing. And the 49ers have to play a pretty clean game, especially up front in order to have some success. They're also fifth in points allowed per game, fifth in touchdowns allowed per game, eighth in opponent completion percentage, eighth in passing yards allowed per game, eighth in red zone scoring percentage allowed, 14th in total yards allowed per game, 15th in third down conversion percentage allowed, 17th in average rushing yards per carry, 17th in first downs allowed per game, 20th in opponent average time of possession. That could be something in this game, because I feel like the 49ers, if they want to go to a on the ground attack, this might be the game to do it. 22nd in rushing yards allowed per game as well for the Cowboys defense. Is there anything here on this list, Rich, that kind of strikes you as this could be something that the 49ers exploit, or even something that they got to be careful about this?
Yeah, I think they're really going to go hard at him in the running game. Lately, I think the Cowboys have been playing a lot more like three safety defense, and that just might have something to do with the amount of passing, high-profile passing attacks they play, and maybe game plan specific, like against the Buccaneers, they went a lot of three safety coverages. But I really think where they're going to hurt Dallas is probably in the running game. And I'm trying to find the Packers game, and I think the Packers ran pretty well on them. Yeah, Aaron Jones
I saw that.
24 carries for 138 yards in that game, just to Aaron Jones. A.J. Dillon was probably, A.J. Dillon 13 carries, 65 yards. So just on the running backs alone in that game, the Packers had over 200 yards rushing. And Packers are a bad team. That's one of the things they did well. That's one of the things they did well, and that's one of the things the 49ers obviously do a lot better than pretty much damn near every team in the league. So 22nd, I thought they might have actually had a worse rush defense than that. But I think nothing's going to change for Shanahan. He's going to lean heavily into the run game like he always does.
Yeah, I absolutely think so as well. And a big part of that, of course, is their offensive line. So as we look at the 49ers offensive line, what they're going to be up against, we have to consider the fact that this offensive line is completely different than that of what the Cowboys faced last season in that wild card game. And really quickly, let me jump to this slide really quick to show you guys how different it was. Four different starters if you count in that particular game against the Cowboys. Laken Tomlinson played, Alex Mack, Daniel Brunskill, Tom Compton, two of which no longer with the team in Tomlinson and Compton. And as we know, Daniel Brunskill isn't a starter. Alex Mack retired. So I mean, it's just a completely different front that the defensive line of the Cowboys are going to be facing. And keep in mind, I mean, this unit for the 49ers this season has been pretty good. They're currently ranked third in pass blocking efficiency. But of course, I mean, we got to consider the fact that the Cowboys defensive line, I think, has improved as well. The last time they played, they were okay. I mean, Randy Gregory was probably their best defensive lineman in that game as far as what he was able to produce, but he's no longer with them. So they're currently ranked second in pass rush win rate, though. And I think a big part of that has to do with Micah Parsons, right? So he's the guy who the 49ers have to be the most alert for in this game. And he's been more productive this year, I think, primarily because the Cowboys are using him a little bit differently. I mean, last season, he was more of an off-ball linebacker. And this season, it seems like he's playing on the defensive line, more of an outside linebacker role. So how do you feel like the way that the Cowboys are using him and how that could potentially play a role in this game since he has a different role now?
He's had a really good year, and he's another guy that, like, if you don't think Bosa is defensive player of the year, you probably think Parsons is defensive player of the year. I mean, they've had a comparable year. Obviously, Bosa has a few more sacks, but Parsons has been destroying everybody that he plays this year. It's I hate saying it's fun to watch, but I like watching good players, and he's a really good player this season. So he's going to give if. I don't know the splits where he lines up. I could probably pull it up on PFF if he's playing more left or right. But I would think that, as well as McGlinchey's played, he's probably going to have his hands full with him, because I have seen Parsons line up a handful of times on the left side of the defense. So that's McGlinchey's right side. So that's going to be a tough test. Now, last year, obviously, they were able to hang in there pretty well. But like you said, he wasn't as much of a pass rusher last year as he is this year. So 3 new starters along the offensive line. Yeah, they've been great, but this is as good a test as any for them right now. Especially with, a first-year starter in there, or basically 2. I don't think Brendel's really been a starter for this many consecutive games in his career. And then, Burford and Banks in the other interior spots. Now Parsons isn't rushing in the interior, but you will get, loop stunts, tackle end exchange stunts from Dallas. So they may get some reps against him, but it's going to be a really good test for them. Again, another prolific pass rusher that they're going to have to face.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just pulled up the numbers for Micah Parsons, where he lined up. It seems like primarily on the right side, but 471 snaps on the right side compared to 260 on the left. I mean, I really think he's just going to go where the better matchup is. And Trent Williams is on the left side of the line. So I would think he would try to line up against Mike McGlinchey as much as possible in this game. So Mike McGlinchey, though, has been solid, I think, this season, more so than some people admit. And even in these last few games, I think he's done a pretty good job. Are you worried about him at all? I mean, I figure like the 49ers are probably going to help him out anyway, given that Parsons is so dominant.
Yeah, I would expect them to give him or Williams a lot of help on that, whatever side he lines up on, with a tight end or a running back chip before they go out and do a pass route or something. They're going to have to do something to slow him down. Now, I mean, Parsons isn't going to win 100% of his pass rush reps. No pass rusher does that. So they're going to win some battles too. But when they do, they really need to take advantage of those situations that they can beat him in those reps and really move the ball to negate his effect. Because if they can kind of keep him off balance, running the ball or whatever, the more you can control the game and slow it down, the less opportunities he's going to have to go against McGlinchey or some of the other weaker linemen in the interior. So I think that's probably what their game plan is going to be. It's not going to look anything like Seattle's. You'll probably see a lot of play action again, but Shanahan came out in the Seattle game throwing the ball more early on than he did running it. And that's because, the familiarity with Seattle's coverage schemes and ways to exploit it that he knows how to do. I think he knows how to exploit Dan Quinn's defense, and he did it last year with the running game. So he'll probably, look to do the same thing again. It's going to look a little different than last week.
I think that Kyle Shanahan matches up pretty well against Dan Quinn too. And it feels like anytime he coaches against someone he's familiar with, he kind of throws the kitchen sink at him. But I expect, Dan Quinn will probably see his best effort too. And of course, he has a better defense this season. So he'll probably throw the kitchen sink at Brock Purdy, but we'll talk more about that in a bit. But yeah, let's talk about the, let's see here, how the Cowboys defend against tight ends. So they're actually not bad at defending tight ends. And I was actually surprised to see they only allowed 2 touchdowns to tight ends this season. But I also looked at who they faced, and really the best tight end they faced this season was Dallas Goedert with the Eagles. So they faced them twice in 2 games against Dallas. He had 5 catches, 89 yards total. So they did a pretty good job against Dallas Goedert. I would say that Kittle is a far better tight end than him, maybe just a tier above. But Kittle lately, he's been on an absolute tear. So that's something to consider, especially his contributions with his touchdowns. It has been the biggest thing more than anything as of late. And last season against Dallas, he only had 1 catch and 18 yards. I mean, what can we expect out of Kittle this time? I mean, what did they do against Kittle that worked so well in that game? And we also got to keep in mind the 49ers have better weapons. I think back then Kittle was a huge part of the weapons, and it was also a down year for Kittle in which a lot of people were like, why is he blocking so much? And he's not even blocking that much. But something you discuss all the time, right? But is there something they did, or was it just something that the 49ers or Kittle weren't doing enough in that one? Hey, you're muted.
Sorry about that. It was more so stuff that Dallas was doing last time. They were basically bracketing him or doubling him on his pass routes. And they had to find other ways to get other people open. So that's when that was a game they leaned heavily into Juwan Jennings, Aiyuk, Deebo, and those are, Deebo and Aiyuk are great weapons, but when you're getting most of your run from the third receiver, or in some cases, sometimes wide receiver 2 is Jennings, that's not a good recipe there. But Jennings made some clutch catches. I think he's a big target for them on third down in that game, and then especially this season. But if you could take away Kittle, that most of the time, probably 65-70% of the time, the passing game runs through Kittle and Garoppolo. You can force Garoppolo to move to other reads where he might panic a little more, and you might sack him, or he might force him into a bad throw. He was hurt for some of that game and going into that game, but he still made some, aside from the throws themselves, he still made some kind of questionable decisions. Like his decision making wasn't, it's never been great, but it wasn't great in that one, especially. But now with Deebo and Aiyuk and CMC and Kittle, and they all kind of take the pressure off of each other. And you could see this in the Seattle game in numerous instances. Like they don't know who to cover. They didn't know who to cover, who to pass them off to, and things like that. Like I don't know what, until we see it, I don't really have a sense of what Dan Quinn's going to do, because they have no defense has faced a team with 4 and maybe you count Juszczyk in there as a kind of like a 4.5 or a 5th, kind of an elite player, just based on what he does and how they use him. And you have 5 potential guys that you have to account for in every single play.
Yeah.
It's easier to account for 1 or 2 guys and bracket another, and then you can kind of gauge where the play is going to go after that as a defense. In this one, that they're really going to have their hands full. So even if Kittle's not getting open, somebody's going to be open, because they can't cover, and they can't bracket or double cover really anyone. And 49ers haven't really been getting a lot of that since McCaffrey joined the team. So you can't just you can bracket one guy, but that you're just taking a defender away from another area that they need to of the field they need to defend from another player. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities there for yards after the catch and things like that. And I'm sure Kittle's going to have his share of targets. Purdy's been kind of leaning into him a lot since he started, or since he's been starting. So I wouldn't expect that to change. And even if he doesn't, they will get Jennings in there and they will get other guys in there that they can get the ball to in open space. Even if, someone like Jennings isn't the fastest, there will be plenty of opportunities for that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the whole theme around this episode in particular, right? The Cowboys defense is better, but at the end of the day, I think the weapons that the 49ers have, and I'm sure you've heard the 49ers 21 personnel is being called the death lineup because it's just almost impossible to defend. There's just any one of these guys can get a big play, and they're just as capable of doing that. And yeah, Brock Purdy seems to be comfortable throwing to Kittle. And with CMC in the picture, it's opened things up for him for sure. So if they want to focus on Kittle because, he's been on a touchdown streak here a little bit, someone else is going to get that opportunity, right? So let's see what the Cowboys linebackers looked last time. They had Leighton Vander Esch, who they still have. Back in that game, he had 8 tackles, 6 stops, so pretty good in the run game, and surprisingly pretty good in coverage as well. He allowed all 3 of his targets to be caught, but just -2 yards. So it seemed like he was pretty good there. And I included Micah Parsons here because as I mentioned, he was playing a lot of off-ball linebacker at that time. So 3 pressures, 3 hurries, 6 tackles, 5 stops for Parsons as more of a linebacker back then. But that's who George Kittle is going to be up against. Definitely someone who they can beat. I saw someone mention earlier that if Kittle were just to kind of go behind him, like Vander Esch is not the kind of linebacker who would be able to keep up with someone like Kittle. He's more dominant in the run game. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, there's not many linebackers who can carry Kittle across the field. Probably, at least one of them are on the team right now. So if they can get him open, that's what they were doing last year is they were bracketing him with the safety. So even if you have a linebacker underneath and Kittle can kind of work around that, you have to deal with the safety that's going to roll that coverage down to Kittle. And that's what they faced a lot last year. So this year, I don't think they'll be able to do that. So if you can, I don't necessarily know that, Kyle Shanahan likes to pick on 1 or 2 players on the defense every week. Last week, it was Cody Barton and Ryan Neal. This week, I don't have a good feeling or a good sense of who it could be. I'm not sure that Vander Esch is a guy, maybe not in the run game, but maybe he might be a guy that they can try to find and isolate in the passing game. I wonder who it's going to be because they do have a really good defense, at least better than Seattle's.
Yeah, I agree, and he does always find someone to pick on. It's kind of funny. That's why the
like
meme with the
joke.
microscope. Yeah, the meme with the microscope is a real thing. Good time. So this is what the Cowboys are going to be facing in this game. It's no longer just the Yak Bros, all right? It's a whole family of Yak, and it starts with Christian McCaffrey, who ranks 2nd in yards after the catch this season with 719 yards. Then it's Deebo's 609. Keep in mind, Deebo missed several games this season, so he'd probably be 1st or 2nd or 3rd had he not. He's currently ranked 5th. And then Kittle, 399 yards of Yak. And then Aiyuk, 389. And I only mention this because the Cowboys have allowed the 11th most yards after the catch this season. So that could be something that could play a role in this game potentially. And let's just talk about these Cowboys corners that they have. Trevon Diggs, last time they played, he did a pretty good job, although Aiyuk did kind of burn him on one play or two, and that was always nice to see. Aiyuk probably even a little better this season, a little more polished. So I would expect a pretty good battle between those two. Someone mentioned earlier or yesterday that, they don't see Trevon Diggs as the kind of player who likes contact. Like, he would avoid it. I don't know if you've seen that, but if it is true, then this might not be the best matchup for him, right? Against the 49ers and all of these players that they have, and they all play a very physical brand of football.
Wasn't he the one that Jennings just completely leveled? And then he kind of sat there, like, looking at the ref, like wanting a flag or whatever. Was that him or was that somebody else?
I don't remember.
It was
I
in
gotta
that
watch
game.
the game over, but yeah, I gotta watch it over. But it wouldn't surprise me at all.
So I'm looking at their coverage grades right now, and Anthony Barr, I think, he's not hurt, is he? Is he playing? I think he's.
Anthony Barr, I don't see him listed as one of their corners. I think right now they have Bland.
Well, he's one of their linebackers. I think he's their middle linebacker or something, he's their weak side linebacker. But I think that'll be probably where in the passing game Shanahan tries to rip off cheap yards. That's their worst coverage defender on the starting defense.
There you go. That's where the microscope is. So a couple of corners for the Cowboys who were in the wild card round last year, no longer starters for the Cowboys, still on the team, but now they have Trevon Diggs, Daron Bland, who's a rookie. He's okay, and Jaron Kearse, who comes down to nickel on nickel down. So those have been their guys, and I don't know, maybe Bland is someone who Kyle Shanahan could maybe try to pick on a little bit as well, seeing as how he's a rookie. And I believe last week against Tampa Bay, he got picked on a little bit. He was targeted. Let's see. I'm trying to find the postseason numbers. Yeah, he was targeted 12 times last week. And of course, Tampa Bay, they throw the ball a ton, right? So that's probably part of it. He was targeted 12 times, allowed 8 catches, 98 yards, and a touchdown. So could be another guy that Kyle Shanahan maybe looks to try to get a good matchup on. Another thing that I wanted to point out with these Cowboys defenders is they rank third in pass defense, but they're 32nd in covering number 2 receivers, 28.9% DVOA covering number 2 receivers. This is great for Deebo, right? I mean, I know like there's sometimes we say like Deebo isn't your conventional wide receiver, and sometimes he's not always getting a ton of separation. Do you think this is kind of like a draw here, or is this ranking legit that they might have some trouble with Deebo this week?
Well, they had trouble with him last year because he's one of it goes back to, okay, where does he line up? Is he lining up as a running back? Is he lining up as a slot receiver, as one of the furthest outside receivers? Defenses have really got to keep their schemes and coverages simple, because if he's in the backfield, you're not going to shift a corner inside to cover him, because then they're gonna hit you with the running game. But then now you've got your corner covering someone like McCaffrey outside, and you've got Deebo on a linebacker if it's man coverage or whatever. It's just an absolute nightmare. So wherever he is, he's going to be a matchup problem for someone. And that, if they rank 32nd in covering number 2 receivers, and that's going to be a problem for them, because if he's catching passes out of the backfield, or if he's taking handoffs back there, somebody's responsible for him. And it's in those situations, it's likely a slower linebacker, or maybe the nickel, if they put him in the slot and they go with like 3 receivers, Bland will have to cover him.
Or Kearse, who, like we said, is dealing with that knee injury.
Yeah. So it's really pick your poison. You have to, like I said, like if you watch like Seattle's defense last week was very, very vanilla. They couldn't get sorted out. They couldn't even get their base stuff sorted out on some of these plays because of what the 49ers were doing and where they were lining everyone up at. So it presents a new set of challenges. Doesn't matter where Deebo's at. They have to devote somebody to him or dedicate somebody to him, and chances are it's going to be an inferior player.
Yeah, and the last time these two teams played, he wasn't a big part of the game plan as a receiver, just 3 catches, 38 yards, but it was through the ground that he had the biggest impact, 10 carries, 72 yards, and a rushing touchdown, the one we all remember and love. Rich, I know you got to get out of here in a couple minutes, so I just have one more question. We'll keep the preview going after Rich leaves, but just one question about Brock Purdy that I wanted to ask you before you go, because I'm seeing a lot of talk on the timeline. Of course, a lot of people talking about the 49ers right now because it's playoffs, who are the only teams that are being talked about right now. And there are a lot of people who are giving maybe Brock Purdy too much credit. And then on the other side, I'm also seeing people who are not giving Brock Purdy enough credit and just saying that, oh, it's all Kyle Shanahan. Anyone can do this in Kyle Shanahan's offense, blah, blah, blah. Where do you fall in this stance? Are you somewhere in the middle, or what do you think about Brock Purdy's been doing with Kyle Shanahan's offense so far?
Well, so the offense was pretty efficient. So, well, I mean, it was a little above league average before they traded for McCaffrey, and that was with Lance and Garoppolo for a portion of that. And then when they traded for him, their offensive efficiency skyrocketed, right? Because that's just the player he is. That he fits. This is like the player that Shanahan needed to take the offense to the next level. Yep. And then Garoppolo, I mean, if you like looking at EPA, expected points added stats, like, a couple of beat writers really like the site for individual players. Garoppolo was, I think, top 5 or top 10 again in that stat. Now, I think that's more of an offensive stat than anything, but he really shot up in that metric too. And then when Purdy came in, and then the team did too, the offense, I think, with Garoppolo and McCaffrey went up maybe to the 7 or 8 ranking range in the top 10. And then when Purdy took over, they became just a little bit more efficient. And I think they finished the season inside the top 5 in EPA, maybe 6 or 7, but him coming in made them that much more efficient. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough, to the tune of like blowing teams out, scoring. I think they basically scored 30 points in every game with him except for one.
Right.
Or maybe it's all of them. I don't know.
I think it was except for one. Yeah. And that was the one, I believe, on the short week against Seattle when he was dealing with his oblique.
There was only, so that was understandable, right? But every game since before and after that Purdy played was 30 plus points. So is he like an elite quarterback? Like, is he going to look like Mahomes in a year with a slightly, with an average arm? Probably not. Or, he's probably like, I make a joke about this all the time, but he's like if Kirk Cousins had a brain. I think Shanahan found his Kirk Cousins. This is his Kirk Cousins moment. So he's not going to blow you away by any means with his arm strength or even some of his decision making. Like, it's just, some of it is questionable. He does have a high amount of off target throws, and that's the nature of the kind of quarterback he is. I mean, he takes those chances. He takes those chances and makes throws that Garoppolo hasn't tried in 4 years. And that they just don't call for him. They call the offense differently for Purdy than they did for Garoppolo.
Yes.
More
obvious.
Even though he has I mean, the weaker arm. I mean, I think him and Garoppolo probably have a comparable arm, but they don't call this many downfield passing plays, vertical routes, things like that, deep shots for Garoppolo as they do for Purdy. So, now that gets into like, okay, is it the offense, or is it Shanahan, or is it something Purdy's doing? I think it's a combination of all of it. Like,
yeah,
Garoppolo was playing decently well with all these weapons around him. Finally, Purdy stepped right in, and they haven't looked back. Now, like I said, where Purdy's made his money is he has made a few more of those throws that Garoppolo doesn't make, and he does not look rattled. He does things like his process is right. Like, he's a smart quarterback, and I'm happily admitting that I was wrong about him coming into the spring when they drafted him in the season, because I didn't think he was going to last that long
I think a lot of
or even
people
make
were
the roster.
wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I liked him in college. I didn't like his senior year, and that's where I kind of cooled off on him. I do watch a lot of college quarterbacks before the draft. I don't know. It's fascinating to me to see the process they go through. But if you would have told me back in August that they would be starting Brock Purdy and they would be in the divisional round at 13-4, I would have told you were out of your mind. You're insane. There's no way that's happening if they're on QB3. Like maybe with Garoppolo, but not with Purdy. And here we are. So I do think it's a combination of the talent around him, the offensive scheme, and the kind of quarterback he is. Like they all it meshes well together finally. So sorry, that was my work radio.
You're good.
A lot of people in football Twitter outside of the 49ers don't really like him that much. They don't think he's that good. I don't know if I think he's like good or great. I think he's playing well enough for them to win, and I think that's all that matters right now.
Yeah.
So the opinions vary widely on him, even in football Twitter with some of the national guys I interact with, that I chat with all the time. So some of them don't think they just think he's a product of the system. Some think that he's probably better than he gets credit for. I mean, you can look at any of his game tape and you can find plays and stats and whatever you want to fit whichever of the three things you believe about him. So
yeah,
right now, all that matters is he's their quarterback and they're winning.
Yeah, and the truth is that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but I appreciate your opinion on that, because I've been curious how you feel about it all, because I know you watched a lot of tape, and I trust your takes. So, but good to have you on, Rich, and thank you so much for all the extra perspective you were able to provide today. And have a good rest of your Friday night.
Great, thank you. It was great talking with you.
All right, you too, man. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
All right. So we're going to continue on with the preview as planned. Rich just had 30 minutes with us. I appreciate his time. Oh, and by the way, Rich has a awesome Substack where, he puts a lot of content together about 49ers, film, things like that. If you're into that sort of thing, his Substack is in the description of this video, so make sure you check that out after this. But let's continue on with our preview here. So we got Deebo Samuel, what he was able to do the last time, and as we mentioned, the Cowboys ranking 32nd and covering number 2 receivers. It could be a good day for Deebo, but here's the other guy, and god damn it, my GIF that I wanted to put in here does not work on StreamYard, so but you guys know that Brandon Aiyuk cooked Trevon Diggs a couple of times in this game in last year's wild card matchup, and I would expect that to happen again. Last time he had 6 targets, 5 catches for 66 yards. Again, he got open. In my mind, I say it all the time. He can get open against anybody. So Brandon Aiyuk, I think, can have a few key plays in this one once again. And, I know the Cowboys secondary is solid, but these playmakers, I think Kyle Shanahan can make some things happen with getting guys open, because he can move defenders around based on who he wants to get open. So let's look at the Cowboys defense against wide receivers, how they do there. On the ground, they allow running backs to get an average of 23.5 carries, 98.5 yards, and 4.4 yards per carry average. They've allowed just 6 touchdowns on the ground this season. So for the most part, pretty good. Through the air, I had to mention this. So the stats seem to show, if you look at what they've allowed on average through the air to running backs, 3.6 catches, 26.4 yards a game, 0 touchdowns. They haven't allowed any touchdowns to running backs through the air. All right. So running backs catching out of the backfield, not catching pass downs, not catching touchdowns against this Cowboys defense. Enter Christian McCaffrey. We'll see if that changes because McCaffrey, of course, I think most of his touchdowns have come through the air, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm wrong, but they ranked 21st in covering running backs out of the backfield, 5.3% DVOA. So even though their averages suggest that they're really good against this, I think the DVOA numbers here would suggest that there is some wiggle room there for Christian McCaffrey to potentially get loose in this game. And look, the last time that these two teams played, it was the Elijah Mitchell show. It was only Elijah Mitchell. He had 27 carries. That's quite a lot. 96 yards and a touchdown. And Elijah Mitchell this season, let's look what he's done. So, of course, he's been hurt most of the season. He was back between weeks 10 and 12, and he did a lot of good things in that span. I mean, look at his yards per carry average, 4.9, 6.6, 5.0. I believe his average for the season, and albeit it is a small sample size, it's 5.2 yards per carry average for Elijah Mitchell. These last two games, so week 18 against Arizona, he handled just 5 carries. He had 55 yards, mostly because he had a really long run in that one. He also had 2 touchdowns because, again, like he was also involved in the red zone packages. Against Seattle last week, he had 9 attempts, but only 2 yards. So not as effective against Seattle. And we'll see what we get from Elijah Mitchell this week. But of course, we don't have to depend on Elijah Mitchell alone because Christian McCaffrey is also in the picture for this team. So I think that's one of the big key differences in this game, that Christian McCaffrey is going to be available. And we all know the challenges that defenses face when trying to defend against Christian McCaffrey, because he could do so many things well. And so I think that's going to be one of the big differences in this game, as well as another new weapon for this offense. Again, at the start of the season, if you would have told us Brock Purdy would be a weapon for this offense, we would have laughed in your face, right? But he's been very efficient so far with this team and what he's been able to do. He's able to put up points. The offense is able to put up points with him at quarterback, and that's all the 49ers need right now. So last week against Seattle in the wild card round, the first half he was a little shaky. I mean, he was escaping the pocket early. He just seemed a little rattled. He was missing guys that were open. He trying to maybe do too much, and it wasn't terrible, but it's not what we're used to seeing out of Brock. He was 9 of 19, 147 yards and a touchdown in the first half against Seattle last week. In the second half, though, and this is what we've been seeing as of late, in the second half, this offense and Brock Purdy, they just step their foot on the gas and they don't stop. So in the second half, he was 9 of 11, 185 yards and 2 touchdowns. He ended up being extremely solid in that game. 3 touchdowns if you count the rushing touchdown that he had, the QB sneak. So 4 touchdowns on the day, and he could have had 5 if you count. Well, not if you count. He could have had 5 if Brandon Aiyuk caught that 1 touchdown on the Mahomes-like scramble play when he targeted Brandon Aiyuk in the end zone. That would have been a really, really nice play. But this is what Brock Purdy is doing with this offense. I mean, he's looking great. He's been efficient. Of course, the one thing we're worried about is Micah Parsons, this Dan Quinn-led defense. Are they going to try to confuse him? I expect that they will try to confuse him as much as possible. They're going to try to disguise coverages. They're going to try to get some pressure on him, and not by way of blitz. I think their defensive line is good enough that they might get some pressure without having to blitz. So that's what Brock Purdy is up against. Hopefully the offensive line is able to, do enough to keep Brock Purdy comfortable. And of course, if he does have to escape the pocket, hopefully he's not going to his left too much because he did that a lot against Seattle, and I would expect that the Cowboys saw that and might be better prepared for that. Also talked about it with Chris on the channel yesterday. If he rolls to his left, he has to turn to set his feet. So not ideal. Rolling to his right is much more efficient because he's able to at least throw on the move at that point, because he is a right-handed passer. So these are things we got to keep an eye on in this game. But I like Brock Purdy, okay? If he has a shaky first half, it's possible. We've seen it these last few games. If he has a shaky first half, don't panic. Don't panic because as of late, this offense has been a second half team. Our entire team has been like a second half team. Even the defense has kind of clamped down a little bit more in the second half. So don't panic at the score at halftime. All right. If it's close, if the Cowboys are up by a little bit, it's okay. I think this offense is going to be able to figure it out because, as I said, the difference with this team are the new weapons. One, the offensive line, how many new faces on the offensive line they have, how good they've been. Spencer Burford. Kyle Shanahan just finished saying earlier today he thought Spencer Burford had his best game of the season against Seattle last week. That's great. He's growing. He's improving week in and week out. So that offensive line is doing well. Then it's Brock Purdy, the way he's running this offense. Then it's Christian McCaffrey, who adds like another dynamicness. Is that a word? I don't think so, but I'm going to say it anyway. Dynamicness to this offense that is so hard to defend, and not just defending Christian McCaffrey, but it makes it harder to defend everyone else because you focus on Christian McCaffrey, it opens things up for everyone else. So that's the impact of these new players for this team. And I think that's going to make the difference for this team. It's going to put them over the top. So first things first, you got to protect Brock. Okay. So this game is going to be won in the trenches, I think. And if they protect Brock, he has to do himself a favor as well. And Kyle Shanahan has to help him out with this, get the ball out quickly, because I think at least to start the game, the Cowboys are going to come out with a lot of pressure. They're going to be playing with their hair on fire. They're going to be pumped, all right? Because to them, this is their revenge game. So I expect them to come out flying on all cylinders on defense. So protect Brock. Brock needs to get the ball out quickly and limit mistakes and turnovers. This one's huge because, as mentioned in the first, looking at the Cowboys defense, they're first in takeaways per game. The 49ers defense is second. So Cowboys are better in that regard in creating takeaways and creating turnovers. They are second in sack percentage. So they are, I believe that's second only to the Eagles. The 49ers defense are about like sixth, I want to say. And they are second in turnover margin per game. The 49ers are first in turnover margin per game because they have been protecting the football. So all of these things tell me take care of the ball. And so that's going to be huge. Don't give them any easy turnovers or anything like that. Limit mistakes, limit the turnovers. And, I didn't include it here, but I think this is a good week to get down with the rushing attack because I think that's going to help Brock Purdy as well. And so establishing the run, that's something that, Kyle Shanahan has actually kind of gone away from these last few games a little bit because unless they're in the lead, of course, and about to win the game. But I feel like early in the game, they're leaning into the pass more. So I feel like this is a good game to kind of counter that and try to run the football. And as Rich mentioned earlier in the episode, the Packers had a really good game on the ground against the Cowboys, something I'm sure the 49ers are going to be looking at and say, we can do that too. Of course, Mike LaFleur running a very similar offense to the 49ers, pretty much the same offense. So they could do it if they want. If they want to run the football, they'll have that opportunity because I think the Cowboys are going to go into this game wanting to stop Brock Purdy, and that's probably their main focus. But don't forget about the 49ers run game because it is fierce. And so that is my preview for the 49ers offense. Now, let me get a score prediction off for you guys. I say that this game will be close, but I think it won't feel as close as it is. So let's see. I say, yeah, last time 49ers scored 27, right? I feel like it could be similar. I'm going to say 28-21. That's my prediction for this game. And it could go either way. It could be a defensive game. It could be a shootout. To me, it could go either way. And I think regardless, the 49ers are going to come out on top because they're the most balanced. So looking at this poll, I put out a poll on the YouTube live here. I asked you guys, will Cowboys... Here we go. Let me end the poll and then I could see it. Will Cowboys defense succeed in making Brock Purdy uncomfortable on Sunday? 53% of you said no, they will not succeed in making him uncomfortable. And 46% of you said yes. So, I mean, I feel like that's a pretty good assessment. It could go either way. And I feel like for a half, maybe in the first half, we see the pressure kind of get to Purdy, but in the second half, I think Kyle Shanahan is going to make adjustments. I think Brock Purdy's going to make adjustments. I think he's going to settle in. It'll all be all right. And go Niners. I think they're going to win this game. I appreciate all of you guys spending your Friday evening with me today. And let me get to some comments really quick. Sin says, good show. Thank you very much, Sin. Appreciate you always supporting. Hind, he says, could we see Danny Gray get a big trick play yards touchdown? I don't know. It's tough. Like if Kyle Shanahan wants to go deep in the bag of tricks, maybe. But I feel like when it comes to playoff time, you want your best players, you want your veterans, you want guys who you can trust out there. And I don't know if Danny Gray is that guy quite yet. Now, if he wants to go out there and put someone who the defense doesn't suspect to get the ball like a Danny Gray, maybe the opportunity. But we'll just have to see what the Cowboys do on defense first. Yeah. Hines says Micah Parsons will do some damage for sure. I think so too. But I think for the most part, the damage might be in the first half. Like I said, I think he's going to come out like shot out of a cannon in the first half. He's going to be really pumped for this game. But as the game progresses, I can see the fact that they played on Monday having a toll, I could see the fact that the 49ers play a very physical brand of football having a toll on the Cowboys defense, right? So I think over the course of the game, it'll wear off, but I totally expect that to start. He's going to be on one. So yeah, Micah Parsons, player I definitely respect, and hopefully the 49ers can find a way to slow him down on the defensive side of the ball and keep Brock Purdy upright. And hopefully Brock Purdy can escape the pocket in an efficient way as well. And, he's been pretty great at that too. So, all right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Make sure that you like this video if you have not yet. As always, appreciate all the love. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. I will be at the game on Sunday. So, of course, I'm going to have my instant reaction as I always do live from Santa Clara. It's going to be a good time. I'm really pumped and I can't wait. So have a good rest of your Friday night, guys. And as always, peace.